I think that individuals have to fight to prevent these acts of genocide from happening and then being forgotten.
And I remember at that moment thinking to myself, this is one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard.
In 2001, the world entered a new century. However, a shadow of war from the previous century had yet to be completely dispersed. On December the 13th, local religious leaders representing Islam, Judaism, Buddhism and Christianity came together at St. Mary's Cathedral in San Francisco to pray for peace. Also present were representatives of the survivors of the Nanjing Massacre. This is the first time such a gathering of people from different cultural and religious backgrounds and different countries has been held anywhere in the world to pray for peace and for the people killed in the Nanjing Massacre. Zhu Changshan, curator of the Memorial Hall of the Nanjing Massacre victims, relates what took place when the Japanese carried out the mass killing in Nanjing. American-Chinese writer Iris Chang says in her address that the long history of humankind has seen many tragedies, but none as brutal as that carried out in Nanjing during the Second World War. Only by learning the lessons of world history, she says, can we achieve future peace. The mass killing of innocent civilians in Nanjing in 1937 is now a matter of historical record. But for some people, it lives on in their memories. In July 2014, a Chinese camera crew visited the west coast of the United States. They came to interview relatives of Iris Chang, a Chinese-American writer who had died 10 years before. She was the author of The Rape of Nanking, The Forgotten Holocaust of World War II.
这是陈若在高中的时候写的诗，一个是 sunrise， 就是那个日出，另外一个是soap bubble， 就是肥皂泡。Nature's paragon of fragility hovers in delicate ascent, glittering in the sunlight with a scintillant. 大概是15、16岁的时候写的。
Brett Douglas first met Iris Chang in 1988 when they were both attending Illinois University.
I actually had seen her on the quadrangle at the University of Illinois. The only thing that really struck me about her was she was very tall, very thin, very pretty, and she was wearing a fur coat, which was unusual for somebody at school there.
Douglas describes Iris Chang as an attractive girl who was outstanding academically and had a unique personality. Iris Chang came from a family of academics. Both her father, Zhang Shaojin, and her mother, Zhang Yingying, had doctorates from Harvard University.
Were the ones who told me about the Nanjing Massacre when I was a little girl growing up in a Midwestern college town. My parents are science professors, and they're very talkative and always told me what it was like for them to grow up during the war in China.
So, it was from her parents that Iris Chang first heard about the Nanjing Massacre of 1937. In August 1937, the Japanese launched a bombardment against Nanjing. Iris Chang's grandfather, Jiang Tiezhun, hid his family in a ditch covered with wooden boards and sandbags. His wife was due to give birth in October, and at the first opportunity, Jiang escorted her to her parents' home in Yixing. He returned to Nanjing several days later.
后来我父亲收到单位说要撤退了，因为他们在上海已经打得很厉害，就是收口信给我妈说你回来的时候赶快就回到芜湖，不要回到南京来了。那么那个时候我父亲已经撤退到芜湖，在那里等船。我爸爸在码头上等了3天3夜，就看不到我母亲的影子，急得简直疯掉了。
With the last boat out of Wuhu due to leave, Jiang Tiezhun could wait no longer. In desperation, he shouted his wife's name across the wide Yangtze River. Then, a miracle occurred.
那我爸爸是在码头上叫的，就说叫我妈妈的名字。我妈妈姓申，申一北，他就说100，居然我妈妈说我在这里，这个简直是好像是上天给我们的一个礼物，所以我父亲这个事情永远不会忘掉。所以我把这个故事告诉了我们的女儿。
Iris Chang's grandparents left Nanjing a month before the massacre. Her family's memories of Nanjing in 1937 inspired Iris Chang to uncover the truth of the massacre.
Throughout my childhood, Nanjing Datusha remained buried in the back of my mind as a metaphor for unspeakable evil. While still in grade school, I searched the local public library to see what I could learn about the massacre, but nothing turned up. That struck me as odd. If the rape of Nanjing was truly so gory, one of the worst episodes of human barbarism in world history, as my parents insisted, then why hadn't someone written a book about it?
In 1994, an exhibition on the Nanjing Massacre was held in Cupertino, in the Bay Area of California. Iris Chang was horrified by what she saw there.
这里就是美国加州库珀蒂诺市社区服务活动中心。在1994年12月10号，也就是南京大屠杀57周年的时候，我们在这里办第一次活动。当时因为纪念南京大屠杀，所以呢，我们在这里有一个56张照片的一个图片展。
Iris Chang was profoundly shocked by what she saw in those photographs.
Though I had heard so much about the Nanjing Massacre as a child, nothing prepared me for these pictures' stark black and white images of decapitated heads, bellies ripped open, and nude women forced by their rapists into various pornographic poses. Their faces contorted into unforgettable expressions of agony and shame.
看到图片以后，他就真的非常震惊。我记得他讲那天就在当场就在会场，他就讲，他说我一定会把这本书写出来。
The old photographs of the brutal slaughter brought home to her the horrors her grandparents had suffered. She decided she had a duty to reveal the truth of the Nanjing massacre and win justice for the victims. On July the 23rd, 1995, Iris Chang travelled to Nanjing. With the help of historians in the United States and China, she was able to contact a number of experts on the Nanjing massacre. One of them was Yang Xiaming.
我一看一个大学生，就感觉很年轻，长得也挺漂亮。当时我还有一点怀疑他能不能写出这本书，因为这本书的那个背景或者是那个资料都比较复杂。
By the 1930s, Nanjing, the capital of the Republic of China, was a well-developed city. It had electric lights, trolley buses, and running water, all novelties in China at the time. Some government officials and rich people even owned telephones and cars. Life was relatively peaceful, but that changed suddenly in 1937. On July the 7th that year, Japanese forces provoked the Marco Polo Bridge incident on the outskirts of Beijing. On August the 13th, the Japanese army launched an attack on Shanghai. 2 days later, its planes bombarded Nanjing for the first time, and people began to flee the city. The Chinese army fought a determined battle to defend the city. At dawn on December the 13th, 1937, Japanese forces entered Nanjing. They immediately began the mass slaughter of the city's residents. The day after arriving in Nanjing, Iris Chang began her research. Her priority was to find survivors of the massacre, and to this end she asked Duan Yueping, Deputy Curator of the Memorial Hall of the Nanjing Massacre victims, for her help.
我呢就负责给他找幸存者，找了李秀英、夏淑琴，他就听，主要听了以后呢，就杨夏明就给他翻译。
She literally kept them busy, morning till night. And then the other thing I remember was the interviews with the people, the victims. And so that's what she was emotional about.
特别是江美，特别是这3枚是激光枪，激光枪它就在那不能危险了，这就是这样的。人死了以后，通常气少，而且死是少的不能像个人的。
有的呢，小孩走不动，能迟早猝死；有嘛年龄大走不动了，能迟早猝死。马路上尽是死，马路上雪尽是雪，这个下雨呢，全是雪。
醒过来一看，哎呦，我是人还是鬼啊？我是人还是鬼啊？有没有人把我打死的？可能我不是人哦。
Over the telephone, Iris Chang told her mother that every survivor she met was eager to tell their story before they died. She would interview each of them for several hours. She recorded every detail of their stories using a video camera.
And 然后呢，他在南京档案馆收到了很多的那个资料，那个资料就是一存一存的案件，就说 每个人的那个受害者的报告，比如说某日某天某日这个人被强奸，然后怎么被杀，怎么的，有很多很多件，他就一直看，一个案件一个案件看。我觉得他这个对他身心的伤害比较大，就是他看到后来他跟我讲，他说都麻木了，我就说那你还要写吗？这么痛苦？他说不要，他怎么能写呢？他说我跟他们这些人比起来，我算什么
？7 of the 8 Nanjing Massacre survivors Iris Chang interviewed 19 years ago have subsequently died. The only one who is still alive is 85-year-old Xia Shuqian.
张任如这个人呢，就对这个他是到南京，他从美国回来的，他是走数。这个自创的是当然在于张，也是来的嘛是，工资蛮高的，工资高的，人非常好，人之间比较也很好。
Iris Chang spent 25 days in Nanjing in the summer of 1995. From the video she shot, it's clear she must have felt uncomfortable in the heat. Despite her poor physical condition, she carried on interviewing the massacre survivors. She also visited places where Japanese soldiers had committed atrocities. During one interview, Iris Chang dropped her camera. This is the only video record of her from the time she was doing research in Nanjing.
也是有时候不小心。Thank you.
Iris Chang used a total of 5 videotapes during that research trip in Nanjing. Those tapes, along with other data she collected during the trip, are kept at Stanford University's Hoover Institution.
This one?
你刚才拿的，你打开这个看看，意思就是这个。
Yeah, this one. Yeah, this one. 这是陈如在1995年访问幸存者的受害者的录影的。你看他日子都有，7月27号1995，7月29号95。他访问那个李秀英。
李秀英的，那是最重要的一个。
最重要的啊。
Before travelling to Nanjing, Iris Chang had done a lot of research in the US. She had consulted books and documents related to the Nanjing massacre in the Library of Congress, as well as in the archives and libraries of several universities. Yale University yielded a lot of valuable data. These included original written accounts by Westerners who had helped the refugees in the Nanjing safety zone.
The materials I found in Yale University, including the documents relevant with the following persons: John McGee, a pastor who recorded all sorts of atrocities with his camera; Robert Wilson, a doctor of Nanking Hospital; Smythe, former sociological professor of University of Chicago, who once taught in Nanking University; and Vautrin, who taught in Jingling College and who set up a refugee camp for the Chinese women. These are but a few foreigners in Nanking at that time, and their diaries and letters have preserved finally in Yale University.
One name she had heard mentioned frequently, even before she visited Yale, was John Rabe.
在1995年的1月，陈如到耶鲁大学的神学院图书馆，就去查这个南京大屠杀的资料。他发现了很多当时在南京的安全区的外籍传教士的日记跟他们的信件。在他们这些日记和信件中，经常提到一个人，就是提到拉贝这一个人，因此他就对这个拉贝这个人发生了极大的兴趣。
John Rabe was a German. He was chairman of the International Committee of the Nanjing Safety Zone. During the early days of the Japanese occupation of Nanjing, he helped thousands of Chinese refugees. Iris Chang hoped to discover more about the Nanjing Massacre by investigating John Rabe. Rabe had once worked for Siemens, so she sent a letter to the company's headquarters in Germany, but she received nothing useful in reply. Then she came across a document which told her that from 1900 to 1903, John Rabe had worked as a merchant's apprentice in Hamburg. So she turned the focus of her investigation to Hamburg.
Das ist eine schwierige Geschichte von Frau Iris Chang. Es gibt einen Verein in München, der sich mit der Geschichte in Südostasien beschäftigt hat. Und dieser Verein unter Leitung eines Pfarrers hat alle Dokumente zusammengetragen von Auslandsdeutschen, die in Südostasien waren. Über den Verein hat Frau Iris Chang Kontakt aufgenommen und Frau Reinhardt kennengelernt in Berlin.
Her search for relatives of John Rabe eventually led her, in 1996, to a retired high school teacher, a Mrs. Reinhardt. Mrs. Reinhardt is a granddaughter of John Rabe.
Ursula Reinhardt, I learned, had been born in China. As a little girl, she even visited Nanjing only months before the city fell. She was Rabe's favorite granddaughter. To my delight, Reinhardt proved endlessly helpful to my inquiries and sent me many long letters with handwritten text, photographs, and news articles. Reinhardt filled in some of the missing details of Rabe's life.
1996年的5月，陈如打电话来，非常兴奋，他告诉我说。兰因哈特告诉他，拉贝有一个日记，而且那个日记是在南京大屠杀期间他记录的，所以他有那个在那一段时间的日记，我们听到了也非常的兴奋。那陈如的那个兴奋的声音，我至今还都不能忘记。
Iris Chang persuaded Mrs. Reinhardt to publish the diary, and on December the 13th, 1996, it came out under the title The Good Man of Nanking, causing an international sensation. In his diary, John Rabe wrote about what he saw and heard during the Nanjing Massacre. The 27 Westerners who stayed on in Nanjing and the Chinese were shocked by the scale of the robbery, rape and murder by your soldiers on the 14th. Yesterday, in broad daylight, several women were raped in the middle of a big house crowded with men, other women and children. We 22 Westerners cannot feed or protect the 200,000 ordinary Chinese day and night. It should be the responsibility of the Japanese authorities. In Nanjing, John Rabe lived at number 1 Xiaofenqiao, next door to the university. Iris Chang stayed on the far side of the campus when she was in Nanjing doing her research. She, in her book, and John Rabe, in his diary, exposed the bloody atrocities committed by the Japanese army. Both also described the just and kindly side of human nature. Amid all the horror, John Rabe did what he could to help the refugees in the safety zone. To the Chinese refugees in Nanjing, John Rabe was a hero who kept their daughters from becoming sex slaves of the Japanese soldiers and their sons from being murdered. For his courage and generosity, he won the respect of the members of the international community in Nanjing and the people who sought refuge in the safety zone.
Mein Großvater ist Februar 1938 mit dem Schiff zurückgefahren nach Deutschland und wurde in Deutschland, nachdem er Vorträge gehalten hat, über das Massaker in Nanjing vom deutschen Geheimdienst der Gestapo verhaftet. Und er wurde 2 Tage verhört und danach freigelassen. Der Film von McGee über das Nanjing-Massaker, den er gezeigt hat in Berlin, wurde beschlagnahmt. Er durfte seine Bücher behalten, musste aber unterschreiben, dass er fortan keine Vorträge und Aktivitäten mehr hat im Hinblick auf das Nanjing-Massaker.
As a former member of the Nazi Party, Rabe was denied a work permit after the war. To survive, he sold his belongings, including the treasured possessions he had brought with him from China. Even so, all he could feed his family on was soup. News of his plight was carried back to China. In March 1947, when the Nanjing municipal government called on its citizens to help Rabe, the response was overwhelming.
这份档案呢，就是有关人员奉命调查拉贝的行踪的一份文书。1947年，南京人民得知拉贝在德国国内生活穷困潦倒一心想帮助他，想资助他。那么在南京呢，就发起了一个捐助拉贝的活动。那些曾经被拉贝救助过的人们都纷纷的慷慨解囊，为他买来食品，像奶粉香肠通过其他的途径送到拉贝的手里。
Dass sie Geld gesammelt hat, 2000 US-Dollar, das war eine unglaublich große Summe an Geld zur damaligen Zeit. Und dass sie organisiert hat mit dem Geld, dass Pakete mit Lebensmitteln nach Berlin geschickt wurden, wo man keine Lebensmittel nach dem Krieg kaufen konnte. Wir sind sehr dankbar dafür, dass die Bevölkerung meinem Großvater geholfen hat, ja.
In those tough times, the parcels from China were a godsend. While Iris Chang was still searching for Rabe's diary, a Western woman who had also been in the Nanjing safety zone came to her attention.
And this box is also from the archives of that United Board, and this is from the Jinling College, which was the women's college. And so here we see Minnie Vautrin's diary of 1937, 1938, and this goes up to 1940.
In the hope of tracing Minnie Vautrin's family and finding her grave, the film crew visited Shepherd, Michigan. Paul is a government worker. He has found some information in the local archive.
This is the burial record book for Salt River Cemetery. This page here has the records of Minnie Vautrin. The burial was 5/18 of 41.
Hi, I'm Harry.
His research leads him to 2 of Minnie Vautrin's descendants, James and Frank. Minnie Vautrin went by the Chinese name Hua Qun. She was born in 1886 and attended the University of Illinois, where, years later, Iris Chang would also study. In the freezing Nanjing winter of 1937, Minnie Vautrin single-handedly saved the lives of numerous people. Among them were many students at Jinling Girls' College.
And Minnie had nothing to protect her. You know, she had no weapon or anything. She had to stand up to them to keep them from coming in. Mm-hmm. Right. But when they would keep her busy, you know, at the entrance of the school, you know, they'd be coming in the back, you know, stealing the young girls out and taking them out and raping them. And
winter scenes described in Vautrin's diary. A stream of weary, wild-eyed women were coming in. said their night had been one of horror, that again and again their homes had been visited by the soldiers. 12-year-old girls up to 60-year-old women raped, husbands forced to leave bedroom, and pregnant wife at point of bayonet. Again this morning, wild-eyed women and girls came of horror. Many kneeled and implored to be taken in, and we let them in, but we do not know where they will sleep tonight. To the people of Nanjing, Minnie Vautrin was a goddess of mercy. To the Japanese soldiers, she was the enemy, and they slapped her in the face and threatened her at the point of a blood-stained bayonet. When they ordered her off campus, Minnie Vautrin refused. "This is my home," she said firmly, "and I will never, ever leave this place." In her book, Iris Chang is full of praise for Minnie Vautrin. As one of the few Western females remaining in Nanking, Iris Chang wrote, Minnie Vautrin is still memorialized today for the peerless courage she showed in order to protect hundreds and thousands of Chinese women from being raped by Japanese soldiers. To historians, her diary helps us understand the inner world of a Nanking Massacre witness. Just like The Diary of Anne Frank, the significance of Minnie Vautrin's memoirs will also be acknowledged by later generations. Minnie Vautrin's diary was discovered in the mid-1980s in the course of a project to archive material about the missionaries in Nanjing. The diary's historical significance immediately caught the attention of Yale's Divinity School, which transferred it to microfilm for the benefit of historical research. Minnie Vautrin suffered deep psychological trauma as a result of her experiences during that dreadful Nanjing winter.
When they came back, they had to watch her all the time because they was afraid, that she would, she came back on ship. One day, something happened on the missionaries left to work. Minnie said, "Well, I'll be okay." And so they went on, and then Minnie went back to the apartment, and she plugged all the cracks and stuff in the apartment and closed all the windows and turned the gas on them.
In her suicide note, Minnie Vautrin wrote the following: "I have deeply loved and respected the cause of missions and Jinling College. Had I 10 perfect lives, I would dedicate them all to this cause of kingdom building. But alas." On the gravestone are 4 Chinese characters. They mean eternity at Jinling. Frank and James have brought their children along to visit the grave. They are keen to keep alive the story of Minnie Vautrin and Nanjing. Since the end of the Second World War, the international community has held many memorial events to mourn those who died in the Auschwitz concentration camp and to reflect on World War II. Due to the Cold War mentality prevailing in the West, however, the Nanjing Massacre, a slaughter unprecedented in human history, has not received the same attention. Right-wing elements in Japan have even denied that it ever happened.
Unfortunately, a amount of evidence, including thousands of archived materials for different languages, as well as photograph and motion picture evidence, and widespread new coverage has not deterred these Japanese extremists from dismissing it all as propaganda or forgeries.
I was driven by indignation to finish the writing, said Iris Chang about her motivation. Making money or not is irrelevant. All I want is to tell everyone in the world what happened in Nanking in 1937. Every day, as she wrote, she was exposed to and psychologically tortured by the brutality of the Japanese soldiers. She couldn't sleep at night and lost a lot of hair due to insomnia and depression. She became emaciated, almost unrecognizable.
She really viscerally felt, what was happening, and I think, when she wrote, it was a combination of outrage and suffering. She really internalized the feelings, of the people that she was interviewing, the accounts that she was reading, and so forth. I think the whole process of writing this book, it was a pretty traumatic experience on many levels.
The Rape of Nanking, The Forgotten Holocaust of World War II, was published in the United States in 1997, just before the 60th anniversary of the massacre. It was the first full account written in English detailing what the Japanese army had done in Nanjing. As a comprehensive study, it quotes witnesses in China, the UK, the US, and even Japan. Many of their stories could be made known for the first time, thanks to Iris Chang's untiring research. The book generated a huge response among the American public, staying for 3 months on the New York Times bestsellers list. It went through 15 reprints, with up to 500,000 copies produced in each run.
The first audiences were all Chinese. In fact, they were all Chinese women. Slowly but surely, kids would walk up to her, because a lot of them were young, and they'd walk up and they'd say, I'm Japanese, but I want to know the truth. I can't find out the truth in my country. And then the audiences enlarged, and there were a lot of people who walked up and said, I'm Jewish. We went through our Holocaust. I want to know about yours. And blacks came up and joined up.
The New York Times, on May 16, 1998, said the following: "This book, by historians, artists and statesmen, has provided the missing link in the chain of war brutality. The significance of this book is far-reaching because it brings a cultural and political awareness of the Pacific War and the crimes Japan committed."
The story of the rape of Nanking, it's obviously well known in China. It was less well known here, and I think Iris's book made a big difference. It was kind of a sea change, because now there was an authoritative source in the English language that people could refer to and read about, where before something like this did not exist.
It's not without a result. The result is that people know about Nanjing 1937.
By opening the eyes of Westerners to the brutal crimes committed by the Japanese army against the Nanjing people in the 1930s, Iris Chang provided them with a fresh insight into the Asian theatre of the Second World War. In writing in great detail about the atrocious behaviour of the Japanese army in China, there was nothing she shied away from. Thanks to her courage, Western society realised there was no doubt that the Nanjing Massacre really did happen. This interview took place at Iris Chang's home.
I feel very fortunate that The Rape of Nanking did become a bestseller. I didn't want the story to just disappear. I didn't want all those thousands of people's lives to vanish into oblivion. That's why I wrote it. What really bothered me was that powerful forces out there in Japan wanted the story to go away. I just felt it was insulting to the victims, and I think that individuals have to fight to prevent these acts of genocide from happening and then being forgotten.
At a May 1998 press conference, the Japanese ambassador to the US accused Iris Chang of unreal description in her book. He claimed that the book was unfair on Japan after it had apologized for what it had done, and he insisted that the Nanjing Massacre was recorded in Japanese textbooks.
Finally tonight, history between Japan and China, and to Elizabeth Farnsworth in San Francisco.
In December 1998, PBS host Jim Lehrer brought together the Japanese ambassador in Washington and Iris Chang in California in a crossover debate during the 6 p.m. news broadcast.
Iris Chang, you've been talking a lot and working with people who have survived the atrocities that were committed in Nanjing during the war, which you document in your book. What do they say about it?
First of all, for Japan to honestly acknowledge some of the basic facts of these kinds of atrocities, which many revisionists refuse to do, and definitely a written apology, reparations made to the victims, I think, inclusion of Japan's wartime aggression in school textbooks in Japan. What I'm curious to know is, can the ambassador himself say...
Iris Chang issued a challenge. She asked him to apologize in his capacity as Japanese ambassador to the U.S. before the American people.
Other war crimes against China.
As to the incident in Nanjing, we do recognize that really unfortunate things happened. Acts of violence were committed by members of the Japanese military.
Well, that's not entirely correct, because
But the apology.
The apology.
Did you hear an apology?
I don't know. Did you hear an apology? I didn't really hear the word apology that was made. And I think that if he had said genuinely, I personally am sorry for what the Japanese military had done during World War II, I would have considered that an apology. But again, there are words that are used, such as words like regret, remorse, unfortunate things happen.
Something, Ms. Chang, 50 years later...
I realized that, except that it seemed to me, there was one level of expectation. I certainly expected him to say, yes, it happened, and I'm very, very sorry for the people of Japan, for the government of Japan. I would certainly apologize to the people of China for the terrible thing that happened. And he didn't quite go that far.
In Japan, right-wingers protested against the publication of The Rape of Nanking. Some businesses threatened to withdraw their advertising from Newsweek if the magazine published anything by Iris Chang.
I see why Iris, or anyone in her position, would think that Newsweek was being pressured by the Japanese, that it was strange that they delayed her article, and when they ran it, there were no Japanese ads at all in the magazine. She had the Japanese right-wing people calling her and threatening her. I mean, that was extremely frightening.
It seems clear that she also felt challenged and perhaps even threatened by people who really weren't happy with her writing, particularly about the Nanjing Massacre.
Ultimately, Iris Chang suffered a mental breakdown. The threatening letters she had received had taken their toll. But the main factor was the trauma she has suffered as a result of reading about so much atrocity. She succumbed to depression, and her condition was made worse by overwork, a lack of sleep, and physical exhaustion. On November the 9th, 2004, at the age of 36, Iris Chang took her own life. In the suicide note she left for her family, she wrote, "Please remember that hard-working Iris Chang before she fell sick, that Iris Chang who was devoted to life, cause, writing and family."
I really lost her that summer of 2004. That, you know, from the time we were married, I knew that, you know, she was one of the most capable, trustworthy, competent people I'd ever met in my life. She basically set her goals, that what she wanted to achieve, and threw herself 100% into that and never let anything get in her way.
In Germany, Russia, Poland and Israel, people will never forget the Second World War. Such crimes must never happen again, they say. The same is true of the Chinese people, especially the survivors of the Nanjing Massacre. Time passes, but the memories are still fresh. Those who were killed should never be forgotten, and they should no longer remain as mere numbers. The memories must be kept alive. Iris Chang opened for us a door that had been shut for 70 years. Thanks to her untiring efforts, more people have come to know about the Nanjing Massacre. She is buried on a peaceful mountain slope in California. Her name and her book about the 1937 Nanjing Massacre will never be forgotten.